Maureen, thank you so much for talking to us on what I imagine is a very difficult day. And you sent out a beautiful message on social media with a lovely photo. You said, absolutely gutted at news of your death, Tata Kaunda, founding father of our beloved Zambia. Today, the great lion sleeps. And there's a wonderful photo of you with a microphone interviewing KK. Take us back to that photograph and those memories.
Yes, thank you very much, Sally. It's a very dark day for us in Zambia here today. You know, my reflections, my recollections of Zambia centered around that photograph, of Dr. Kaunda rather, centered around that photograph, because I did that interview with him when I worked for the BBC World Service. I'd traveled to Zambia specifically to record that interview with Dr. Kaunda. And it was an all-rounded interview where he shared with me his experience in the liberation struggle and also his reflections on having governed Zambia for 27 years, as well as what he was doing in his retirement. One of the most significant things that Dr. Kaunda spoke about and which he was proud of as his legacy, and I think a lot of us in Zambia are very proud of, is that he was able to unite a country which has 73 tribes and dialects into a very united country under the motto, One Zambia, One Nation. There was absolutely no seam or any aspect of tribalism in the country in his 27-year rule. And, you know, he had a lot of good tribal balancing in his cabinet as well to ensure that most of the tribes were represented. So that is an important legacy. The other thing that Dr. Kaunda spoke about, and also this is something that we are reflecting on in Zambia and the world over, was his commitment to the liberation struggle in Southern Africa. As you know, Zambia hosted a number of liberation movements back then, and notably the African National Congress and President Oliver Tambo and others, as well as what the Southwest Africa People's Organization of Namibia, of Sam Nujoma, and ZAPU of the then Joshua Nkomo of Zimbabwe. And also his commitment, his foreign policy, most of the time of his governance, was tailored towards ensuring that African countries that were still under colonial rule or under apartheid oppression were liberated. And this also included Mozambique. So obviously, Dr. Kaunda is not only being remembered and respected and revered today by Zambians, but a lot of people in Southern Africa and also on the African continent.
That's so true. And speaking to the ANC and members of eNCA a little earlier in the program, they reflected on the bold and courageous move that Kenneth Kaunda took in deciding to allow Umkhonto we Sizwe to set up base in Zambia. And of course now he has joined great African leaders who have left us, Oliver Tambo, Julius Nyerere, Kwame Nkrumah, and of course Nelson Mandela. And we all remember that image of Kenneth Kaunda at Nelson Mandela's funeral, sort of hopping onto the stage. I think he was probably about 90, 91 at that point. But he does join this legion of departed African leaders. In Zambia tonight, are they feeling similar to how we in South Africa felt when Nelson Mandela died? Absolutely,
absolutely. I mean, Zambians are totally gutted, if I can use that phrase again, because for me it's just sort of summing the mood in the country. When information broke out that he had died, at first people just did not want to believe it, and until we got the official notification from the Cabinet Office, which represent the official voice of the Zambian government at the moment, and people are in shock. Of course, we knew that he was advanced in age and he had been quite frail, but there was almost this selfish attitude where we wouldn't want to lose such a great leader because he's so significant and so important to us that, you know, some people took it with and have taken it with a great deal of shock, but also reflecting. We've had a lot of time in the last few years to look at different political systems and administrations in the country, and a number of people, especially some of us who are older, who lived in the generation of the 1970s and 80s and experienced what KK's legacy was and his governance aspects are now reflecting on how that impacted on our lives. Notable among those things were things like free education. We had free primary school education. We had, of course, we had a one-party state in Zambia. In the 1970s, mid-1970s, Dr. Kaunda's ruling party, United National Independence Party, banned other political parties, which obviously made it very difficult. There wasn't any dissenting or criticism of his leadership. One of the funny things I remember today is that when I was young, I saw a voters register, well, not so much a register, but what was called, what people used to select their leadership then, was a card that showed a picture of Dr. Kaunda and a UNIP and a frog next to it. So people had to choose between Dr. Kaunda or a frog because there was no other opposing leader. And those are some of the aspects that we grew up in. He nationalized the economy, as was expected during the time, the nature of the politics back then. Although Zambia was a non-aligned country, we were more leaning towards the Eastern Bloc of communist and socialist countries like the USSR then, now called Russia and China and so on. So most of our economic policies were in that aspect. And this actually took a very big knock-on effect on Dr. Kaunda, especially towards the early 90s, late 80s and 90s, because we were feeling the bite of the economy not being effective. Our economy was centered around copper, and not much diversification, and it was not competitive enough. World markets were opening up, so obviously people wanted change.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for your reflections this evening. We do appreciate all your memories and your insights. That is a veteran Zambian journalist and broadcaster, Maureen Nkandu.